Hello, my fellow denizens of YouTube land. It's plant-based weight loss here again with my second episode. And in this one, I'm going to talk about what it was like at my maximum weight of nearly 520 pounds. Um, Anyone out there watching this who also is or has been very obese will likely recognize nearly all of this. Um, so anyway, here we go. It's a no-brainer that at that point I was very badly diabetic, and I was on 3 medications for that. Now, without access to medical care, it's entirely possible I'm still diabetic and it's going untreated, but I can only hope that with the food choices I've been making, the damage and the glucose numbers are greatly reduced. That's something I need to try to look into, but it is a given that following the high starch plant-based diet without a lot of fat in it that can get into your bloodstream and your organs and coat your cells, you're not going to have that insulin resistance that leads to the really high blood sugar numbers. So yes, it is possible to cure a diabetic with potatoes, which is really about the last thing you're going to hear in most doctors' offices. They're going to push the drugs, they're going to push the insulin, they're going to give you a calorie-controlled diet that's really no different from what most people eat anyway, that in the long run is not going to help. Anyway, moving on, I had the mother of all sleep apnea. When I had my sleep study done, it was when I was still in the low 400s, and at that time, my breathing cut out over 90 times in the first hour, and my blood oxygen level had dropped to 72%. And normally they said that the standard procedure was to wait 2 hours to hook you up to the mask and start adjusting the pressure of the air going into the mask upward. But with my condition as bad as it was, they hooked me up after barely 1 hour because they didn't want to risk, with the low blood oxygen, me possibly going into cardiac arrest there at the sleep study. So at this point, I still have the sleep apnea to a limited degree, but I did try a couple of nights of sleeping without the mask on for the first time since 2003, I think is the year I got the machine. And I was actually able to do it, and I didn't wake up at all gasping for air, and I had my wife, Jeanette, listen to me and monitor me very carefully, to see if there was any evidence of loud snoring or my breathing not being right. She couldn't find any. Then on the third night I was laying there, and I found that as I was falling asleep, I was encountering problems breathing. So I was like, well, okay, I guess the mask effects might be wearing off, and I do still have the problem, so I am still using the mask, and I'm hoping that when I get into the low 200s, I won't need to anymore. It would be nice if that's not a lifetime thing I need to live with. But if it is, that's okay, because I've been a loud snorer even at times when I was near an ideal weight. So it could be I'm just built that way, and I'm always going to have to use the mask as a precaution.
I doubt it.
Yeah, well, it's open to whatever should happen another 100 pounds from now. The next 2 symptoms that I had are pretty much correlated in a way. What I did for a living back in the 90s and early 2000s was I worked as a casino dealer, dealing blackjack, roulette, craps. games like that, where you're standing rooted to one spot for 40 minutes or an hour or even an hour, 20 minutes at a time. And you do get 15 or 20-minute breaks after every stint on a table, but still for 2/3 or so of the day you're standing rooted in one spot. And I was wearing socks which were calf high, and because I was big and had big legs, even the largest socks I could find were a bit constrictive around my legs, and that puts pressure, like you see where I'm squeezing, and that will affect the veins in the legs. So I ended up with varicose veins and resulting edema, which is where your blood can circulate down this way, but then the little valves in the veins, which make their little V-shaped things, and they go like this and help force the blood back up, those break down. They just kind of go away and they don't do their job anymore. So you've got blood going downward, and then it pools and it can't easily come back up, so you get swelling in your ankles and you get swelling in your calf. And I had that, still do, in my left leg. It affected both legs, but for sure I have at least 3 or 4 busted vein valves in the left leg. And related to that is lymphedema, which is where your lymphatic system just blocks up. And it happens in women who have had breast cancer and radical mastectomies. They'll get lymphedema in their arms and shoulders because lymph nodes right here are damaged. In the obese, what happens is that most often in the thighs, and this is really bad, but sometimes in the scrotal area, the lymphatic system breaks down, and you end up with what starts off as swelling in stage 1 in your thighs and possibly also down in your feet. As you move into stage 2 and late stage 2, which is what I had at its worst, the mass of fluid that's stuck under your skin, it just causes bulging. And if you look on YouTube at some of these videos of extremely heavy people, like up in the 700, 800 and up range, their thighs are just gargantuan, and they literally on the inner thigh just have these huge masses of tissue. That's all blocked up lymph fluid. And I never got to that point, but I was definitely working on it. Late stage 2 starts to get ugly. So you're already very overweight, and now you've got this mass of fluid in both thighs, and when you get up and try to walk, you have to accommodate for that, which makes walking a very interesting proposition. And this is what led to me really not moving around. I mean, not only was there the lymphedema and the edema, but extremely bad pain in the ankles and the knees and the hips. So I wanted to get up and move around and burn some calories, but you reach a threshold where it is literally too painful, and to use the word lazy or anything like that against somebody in that condition is very unfair. You can call them food addicts, which would be true. You can call them fat, just in case they don't know that all that extra mass hanging off that body is fat, if you want to try and be educational at the same time you're being a smart ass. But anyway, moving on from there, all of that swelling in the shin areas of both my legs and in the feet, especially the left foot, you will develop cellulitis and ulcerations, which, are wounds that do not want to heal and which drain constantly, and you need to constantly pay close attention to those, because if you get the wrong infection, you're going to end up automatically losing a limb, or worse. It can result in blood poisoning. It can result in osteomyelitis, which is a bone infection. And in a future video, I'll talk more about just how bad my ulcerations were. It's pretty graphic, but again, my goal and my aim with these videos is to be candid, honest, and upfront. So, I hope that you can withstand me talking about some of that stuff in the future. If not, I do understand. And finally, on top of all those other problems, I had a bonus issue, which I don't believe was weight related, but was in fact related to years of dealing in the casinos. If you've ever seen a blackjack dealer work, whether they're dealing out of one of those multi-deck shoes, which is, they pull one card out at a time, or if they're holding the deck in their hands and pitching the cards to the players, either kind of dealing, as well as the roulette and craps, you do the same motions over and over and over again. And there is an epidemic which doesn't get covered, and in fact a lot of doctors here in Vegas, and probably also in Atlantic City, will do their best to play down this condition, but it's called frozen shoulder. And it's like a rotator cuff injury. A lot of baseball players, especially pitchers, end up with this problem later in their careers from the same throwing motions over and over. Well, the same with dealing cards or the other casino games. What happens is that your shoulders all of a sudden have no range of motion. The whole rotator cuff is just frozen, literally. And if you dare try to move your arm even a little bit out of a very limited range, you get pain that feels like somebody's trying to stick a knife into your rotator cuff and pry your shoulder apart. And when I had that problem at its worst, even with copious amounts of pain medication, if I was walking and stumbled, or if I dropped something and made a move to try and catch it, any sudden motion, even a slight one, trying to pick up a cat and getting unlucky, would literally, the pain would be almost to the point where I would want to pass out. So with the combination of my weight and all of these other factors, it became a thing where I was pretty much shut down, wanted to move but really couldn't for more than a minute or two at a time. And that's when I realized that if I was ever going to get my weight back under control without easy access to medical help, it had to start with diet. And that's why I chose to eat according to the McDougall Plan, and it did the trick. Originally I started out just with portion control, eating regular food, fast food sometimes, hamburger helper here at home, or baked chicken, or just your typical American, heavy on the animal protein, added butter, added dairy, added fat. I just limited my portions and tried to watch my calories, and the weight trickled off. But once I switched to the McDougall way of eating, with the starches, the vegetables, the beans, the fruit, and no added oil, the results were immediate, and they've been ongoing. Well, my 15 minutes is over, so that's it for this episode. Happy birthday to me. I'm 43 today. And thank you all for watching, and I'll be back soon with another episode. Thank you.